The old lady was ready to say goodbye, until a mysterious cat started visiting her every day. The truth that followed moved everyone. The world for Evelyn Hayes had shrunk to the confines of her small living room, its familiar furniture rearranged to accommodate the necessary apparatus of decline. A hospital-style bed positioned for the best view of the garden, an IV pole standing like a silent metal attendant, an oxygen concentrator humming its low, constant drone. At 76, Evelyn, a woman who had once cultivated life with vibrant energy in both her beloved garden and the minds of children during her years as an elementary school librarian, was now quietly, resolutely waiting for life to release its hold. The diagnosis had come years ago: ovarian cancer. There had been surgeries, brutal rounds of chemotherapy, periods of hopeful remission, followed by inevitable recurrence. She had fought fiercely at times, driven by a stubborn love for the simple beauties of the world, the changing seasons in her garden, the scent of old books, the warmth of sunshine on her face. But the latest recurrence, aggressive and widespread, had proven impervious to the remaining treatment options. The doctors spoke now in terms of months, perhaps only weeks, offering palliative care to manage the increasing pain and discomfort. And Evelyn, weary to her bones, had finally surrendered. Not with grace, perhaps, but with a profound, exhausted resignation. She had declined further palliative chemo, refused interventions beyond comfort measures. She wanted no more hospitals, no more false hope, no more prodding and poisoning. She wanted only to be home, in the house she and her late husband Tom had shared for nearly 50 years, surrounded by the familiar ghosts of a life fully lived, and wait for the stillness to become absolute. Her days unfolded with a monotonous languor. Hospice nurse Sarah, competent and kind, with eyes that held both professional detachment and genuine compassion, came each morning to check her vitals, manage her medications, help with bathing. A home health aide came for a few hours in the afternoons. Neighbors and old friends visited occasionally, bringing flowers or casseroles, their determined cheerfulness often feeling more draining than comforting. Evelyn appreciated their intentions, but the effort of conversation, of pretending an interest she no longer felt, was immense. Mostly, she lay propped against the pillows, her gaze drifting towards the large window overlooking the garden she could no longer tend. It was late May in coastal Oregon, and the garden, despite her neglect over the past months, was putting on a brave show. The rhododendrons were bursting with defiant color, irises stood like regal soldiers along the path, and the climbing rose Tom had planted was beginning to unfurl its pale pink buds. Seeing it brought Evelyn a pang of sorrow so deep it felt physical. Sorrow for the lost future seasons, for the untended beauty, for the vibrant life force ebbing away within her own frail body. Often, she simply closed her eyes against it, retreating into the gray fog of fatigue and apathy. Pain was managed, mostly, by the carefully calibrated doses of morphine Nurse Sarah administered. It dulled the constant ache in her bones, but also dulled her senses, blurring the edges of the days, making time feel both stagnant and slippery. She drifted, sometimes sleeping for hours, sometimes lying awake in the pre-dawn quiet, listening to the house settle around her, acutely aware of her own diminishing presence within it. She had made her arrangements. Her will was updated, her modest affairs in order. Her niece in California, her only close relative, would handle things when the time came. There was a quiet efficiency to it all, a tidying up of loose ends that felt strangely disconnected from the messy, vibrant reality of the life she had lived. She felt detached, floating as if observing her own slow fade from a great distance. Hope, that tenacious weed she had cultivated for so long, had finally withered, leaving only the barren landscape of acceptance, or perhaps just exhaustion too deep for any other feeling. The stillness before the final dark had settled in, heavy and profound. The change began subtly, almost imperceptibly, like the first hint of dawn on a long, dark night. Nurse Sarah, during her morning visits, often left the sliding glass door to the small patio slightly ajar, letting in the fresh, rain-washed Oregon air, believing, as she often said, that a breath of the outside world did everyone good, regardless of their condition. The door opened onto a small flagstone patio, just beyond which lay the overgrown tangle of Evelyn's beloved garden. It was through this slightly open door that the visitor first appeared. Evelyn, drifting in that hazy state between sleep and wakefulness, became vaguely aware of a flash of color, a brief movement near the floor. She blinked, focusing her eyes with effort. An orange cat stood just inside the room, frozen mid-step, clearly startled to find itself observed. It was not a kitten, but a mature cat, lean but not starved, with a coat the color of marmalade, a bit dull perhaps, carrying hints of outdoor living in the form of a few burrs tangled in its tail, but undeniably orange. The cat stared at her for a long moment with wide, intelligent green eyes. Then, as if deeming her no immediate threat, took another cautious step into the room. It sniffed the edge of the rug, glanced towards the humming oxygen concentrator with suspicion, and then, seemingly satisfied, padded silently over to the patch of sunlight falling on the floor near Evelyn's bed. It circled once, twice, then settled down, tucked its paws beneath its chest, and began, quite calmly, to groom itself. Evelyn watched, detached, a stray, likely, or perhaps belonged to one of the neighbors. She felt no particular connection, no urge to interact. It was just another element in the slow drift of her days. After a while, the cat finished its toilette, stood up, stretched languidly, gave Evelyn one last unreadable look, and slipped back out the open door as silently as it had arrived. The next day, it returned. This time, it seemed bolder, venturing further into the room. As it walked past the small table beside Evelyn's bed, it nudged something with its head. A single, large, damp maple leaf fluttered to the floor. The cat paid it no mind, proceeding to its sunbeam spot for another nap. When Nurse Sarah arrived, she noticed the leaf. "Well, where did this come from?" she asked cheerfully, picking it up. Evelyn merely shrugged, not bothering to mention the cat. But the cat kept coming back, almost daily. It seemed to time its visits for the quiet hours after Nurse Sarah left, or during Evelyn's long afternoon naps. It rarely made a sound, simply slipping in, finding a comfortable spot, often the sunbeam, sometimes the foot of her bed if she didn't stir, napping for an hour or two, and then leaving. And sometimes, not always, it left things behind. Not placed deliberately, it seemed, but dropped or nudged nearby as it moved through the room. A smooth gray pebble from the garden path appeared one day on the rug. Another time, a vibrant pink azalea blossom, slightly crushed, lay near the leg of the bedside table. Once, It was a long, iridescent blue jay feather. Evelyn began, despite herself, to notice these small tokens. They were incongruous, these little bits of the outside world appearing silently in her sterile sick room environment. She didn't attach any particular meaning to them, not at first, but their presence, coupled with the cat's quiet, undemanding companionship, began to pierce, however faintly, through the fog of her apathy. She started watching the cat more closely. There was something vaguely familiar about its markings, the way it held its tail, the particular shade of its green eyes. But memory was slippery, unreliable. She'd known many cats over the years. This was just another stray, drawn by warmth or perhaps the scent of sickness, an instinct she didn't care to examine too closely. Still, she found herself listening for the soft padding of its paws, glancing towards the patio door in the quiet afternoons. The cat asked nothing of her. It didn't demand food or attention. It simply was, a quiet, living presence in a room increasingly defined by absence and waiting. Its visits became small, silent punctuation marks in the long, unwritten sentences of her final days. An orange visitor, appearing and disappearing like a half-remembered dream, leaving behind only the faintest trace. A shed whisker, a fallen leaf, a tiny unexpected disturbance in the stillness. The daily appearances of the orange cat became less a curiosity and more a quiet anchor in Evelyn's drifting existence. She found herself timing her naps so she might be awake when he slipped through the door. She started leaving the patio door open just a crack herself, even when Nurse Sarah wasn't there, listening for the soft sound of his arrival. He grew bolder, his initial caution replaced by a quiet sense of belonging. He'd still enter silently, perhaps drop a leaf, or one memorable day, a slightly battered dandelion head near her bed, but then he'd often jump silently onto the foot of the bed itself, knead the blanket softly for a moment, a motion that stirred a faint, elusive memory in Evelyn before curling up to sleep. His presence was a warm, solid weight, a living counterpoint to the chill that seemed to seep ever deeper into her bones. One quiet afternoon, as the cat napped peacefully at her feet, Evelyn heard herself speaking, her voice raspy from disuse. "Hello there, cat," she whispered. "Come visit again?" The cat's ears twitched, but he didn't open his eyes. Encouraged by the lack of rejection, Evelyn continued, the words spilling out hesitant at first, then more freely, filling the quiet room. She told him about the garden, about the prize-winning roses Tom used to grow, about the stubborn patch of mint that always threatened to take over. She talked about her years at the library, the joy of finding the perfect book for a curious child. She spoke of Tom, of their quiet life together, the shared jokes, the comfortable silences. She found herself retrieving memories long dormant, polishing them like old silver, holding them up to the light of the present. It felt strange, talking to a cat, but profoundly comforting. He was a perfect audience, attentive, or at least seemingly so, non-judgmental, his soft purr occasionally rumbling up like gentle applause. Sharing these fragments of her past felt like reclaiming pieces of herself that the illness had tried to erase. Nurse Sarah noticed the change immediately. "You seem brighter today, Evelyn," she commented one morning, fluffing her pillows. "Did you sleep well?" "I had a visitor," Evelyn replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "Oh?" Sarah looked around the room. "An orange cat," Evelyn explained. He comes most afternoons now, just sits with me." Sarah nodded, her expression kind. She had noticed the cat slipping in and out occasionally, had seen the odd leaf or pebble on the floor. She understood the power of small comforts, especially now. "Well, he seems to be in good company," she said gently. "Maybe we should give him a name." Evelyn considered. "Marmalade," she said, the name surfacing unexpectedly from some deep well of memory. "He looks like marmalade." "Marmalade it is," Sarah smiled. "As long as he's not bothering you, he's welcome. Sometimes our furry friends know just what we need." Sarah made a quiet arrangement with the home health aide to ensure the patio door was often left slightly ajar, facilitating Marmalade's visits without making it an official pet therapy situation that might involve problematic regulations. The change in Evelyn became more pronounced. She started asking Sarah to help her sit up in the armchair by the window for longer periods, watching the garden, often with Marmalade napping on the windowsill nearby. She requested the curtains be opened fully each morning, letting the sunlight flood the room. Her appetite, long dormant, flickered back to life. She started finishing the small meals the aide prepared, even asking for specific things. A cup of tea, a piece of toast with actual marmalade. She still felt weak. The fatigue was a heavy cloak, but the suffocating blanket of despair had lifted slightly, allowing small shafts of light to penetrate. She looked forward to Marmalade's visits with an eagerness that surprised her. His quiet presence, the small, seemingly insignificant gifts he sometimes left, the comforting weight of him sleeping at her feet, it all combined to create a fragile yet persistent sense of connection to the living world she had thought herself entirely detached from. The whispers of hope were faint, easily extinguished, but they were undeniably there, stirred by the quiet loyalty of an unexpected orange visitor. Evelyn wasn't thinking about cures or miracles, but she found herself thinking about today, about the sunlight on the rug, about the purring cat, about the taste of tea. And for the first time in a long time, today felt like something worth paying attention to. The subtle shift within Evelyn, sparked by Marmalade's quiet companionship, began to coalesce into something more tangible, a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, no dramatic reversal of prognosis, but rather a quiet, internal realignment, a turning back towards engagement with whatever life remained. She found herself paying closer attention not just to Marmalade, but to the world outside her window again. She noticed the specific shade of blue in the sky, the way the light changed throughout the day, the industry of a robin building its nest in the climbing rose. These small details, which had been lost in the fog of her illness and despair, now seemed vibrant, precious. The simple fact of being, of witnessing another sunrise, another bird's flight, took on a significance it hadn't held for months. Marmalade remained her constant shadow. He seemed to sense the change in her, spending more time awake when she was often sitting near her chair, blinking slowly as she spoke to him, recounting more stories, or simply reading aloud from a book of poetry. His presence was calming, grounding. When pain flared, she found herself reaching out to stroke his soft fur, his steady purr, a soothing vibration against the ache. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He felt like an anchor. One morning, during Nurse Sarah's visit, Evelyn looked directly at her, her gaze clear and steady for the first time in weeks. "Sarah," she said, her voice quiet but firm, I've been thinking about the palliative treatments Dr. Ramirez mentioned. Sarah paused, setting down the blood pressure cuff, giving Evelyn her full attention. Okay, Evelyn, what are you thinking? The low-dose chemotherapy, the one she said might help with the pain, maybe slow things down a little. I know it won't cure anything. I understand that. Evelyn took a breath. But I declined it before. I didn't see the point. Now, she hesitated, glancing towards the window where Marmalade was watching a squirrel with intense concentration. Now, I think I'd like to try. If it gives me a little more time, a little more good time, I want to try. Sarah's professional demeanor softened into a warm smile. Evelyn, that's wonderful to hear. Of course, it's entirely your decision always, but if you feel ready to explore those options again for comfort and quality of life, Dr. Ramirez will be very supportive. Shall I let her know you'd like to talk? Yes, please, Evelyn said, a wave of mingled apprehension and resolve washing over her. It wasn't a decision born of false hope for a miracle cure. It was a choice to actively participate in her remaining days, to fight not against the inevitable end, but for the quality of the journey towards it. It was a choice to live the time she had left, rather than simply wait for it to be over. Dr. Ramirez, the hospice physician, visited the next day. She spoke gently with Evelyn, ensuring she understood the goals of palliative chemotherapy, managing symptoms, potentially slowing progression slightly, improving quality of life, not aiming for a cure. She explained the potential side effects, milder than aggressive curative chemo, but still present. Evelyn listened carefully, Marmalade now curled peacefully on the foot of her bed. Looking at the cat, feeling its steady warmth, she felt a quiet certainty. I understand, Doctor, she said. I want to proceed. Starting the treatment again required effort. There were appointments, manageable side effects like fatigue and mild nausea, days when she felt drained. But there was a crucial difference this time. Evelyn faced it with a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just enduring, she was actively choosing to engage, to seek comfort, to maximize the potential for good days. Marmalade seemed to sense the shift, sticking even closer during the more difficult days post-treatment. He'd nap beside her for hours, his purr a constant soothing presence. His quiet loyalty was a source of immense strength for Evelyn. Looking at him, she felt a profound gratitude for his unexpected return, for the way his simple presence had reignited a spark she thought long extinguished. He had, quite literally, coaxed her back towards life, not by demanding anything, but simply by being there, a warm orange anchor in the storm. The choice to live, truly live, whatever time remained, felt like the most natural response to such quiet, unwavering devotion. With Evelyn's renewed engagement in her care and Marmalade's constant presence, a gentle, comforting rhythm established itself in the house on Hemlock Lane. The palliative treatment seemed to be helping, easing some of the deeper bone pain and granting Evelyn periods of greater alertness and comfort. She spent more time sitting up, sometimes even taking a few assisted steps with Nurse Sarah to the patio door to breathe the fresh air directly. Marmalade was always nearby, a silent, watchful companion. Their bond deepened in the quiet spaces of shared time. Evelyn learned Marmalade's habits, his preferred napping spots, his disdain for sudden noises, the funny little chirping sound he made when anticipating a meal. the way he meticulously groomed himself after coming in from the garden. He, in turn, seemed to learn her rhythms, appearing beside her bed when she stirred in the morning, settling near her chair when she read, seeming to offer extra comfort on days when her pain was worse. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn was sitting in her armchair, a thick quilt draped over her lap. Marmalade, seeking warmth and closeness, hopped onto the quilt and began kneading it methodically with his front paws, his claws catching slightly in the old fabric, his purr a deep rumble. It was a familiar, comforting sight. Evelyn absently stroked his soft fur, her mind drifting. She looked closely at the cat, truly studying him perhaps for the first time since her realization about his identity began to stir. She noticed a tiny V-shaped nick in the rim of his left ear, almost invisible unless the light caught it just right. And suddenly, a memory, sharp and clear as a photograph, flooded her mind. Her Marmalade, barely more than a kitten, maybe 6 months old, got into a tussle with a neighbor's territorial tomcat through the fence. There had been a frantic yowl, a flash of fur, and Marmalade had come running back inside with a small bleeding nick on his ear. She remembered cleaning it gently, fussing over him, the tiny scar that remained. Her hand stilled on the cat's back. She leaned closer, gently tilting his head to examine the ear. There it was, faded with age, partially obscured by fur, but unmistakably the same small V-shaped mark. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. Could it? 5 years? 6? It had been 6 years since she'd made the heartbreaking decision. Her cancer had returned aggressively the first time, requiring months of intensive treatment, long hospital stays, and a move to a small, sterile apartment temporarily because she couldn't manage the house alone. Caring for Marmalade had become impossible. Through tears, she had arranged for him to go to a no-kill shelter, hoping desperately he would find a good home quickly. She hadn't been able to bear visiting him there, the guilt and sorrow too overwhelming. She had eventually moved back home, but the house felt empty, her recovery slow, and asking about him later felt like reopening a wound she couldn't face. She had assumed, had forced herself to assume, he'd been adopted long ago. Now, this old cat, with the familiar nick in his ear, kneading her quilt with the same focused intensity her Marmalade always had. "Marmalade?" she whispered, the name feeling different on her tongue now, filled with a fragile, burgeoning hope. The cat stopped kneading and looked up at her, his green eyes meeting hers directly. He blinked slowly, then let out that soft, questioning chirp she remembered so well. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face, hot and silent. It was him. Impossibly, miraculously, it was her Marmalade. He hadn't forgotten. He had somehow, after 6 long years, found his way back to her, back to their home. How had he survived? Where had he been? Has someone cared for him? The questions tumbled through her mind, overwhelmed by the sheer, staggering fact of his presence. He hadn't been a stray drawn by chance. He had come home. He had sought her out in her time of greatest need, just as she had once provided him shelter when he was a young cat. The leaves, the pebbles, the petals, maybe they weren't accidental drops after all. Maybe they were his way, the only way he knew, of bringing something of the outside world, something of life, to her bedside. She gathered the old cat into her arms, burying her face in his warm, familiar-smelling fur. Marmalade, perhaps sensing the shift, the wave of emotion, didn't pull away. He stayed, allowing himself to be held, his purr intensifying, a steady, vibrating reassurance against her grief and overwhelming joy. "You came back," she sobbed quietly. "Oh, Marmalade, you came back." The thread connecting them stretched thin across years of separation, illness, and hardship, had held. It had drawn him back to her side, a small, furry testament to a loyalty that defied explanation. The heartbreak of their separation was still there, a deep ache for the lost years. But it was overshadowed now by the profound, healing miracle of his return. He was here. Her Marmalade was home. The revelation that the quiet orange visitor was truly her long-lost Marmalade infused Evelyn's remaining time with a light and warmth she had thought impossible. The knowledge resonated deep within her, settling into a place of profound peace, easing old guilt and filling the quiet rooms with a sense of homecoming. Marmalade, seemingly content now that his presence was fully accepted and understood, rarely left her side. He slept curled on her bed through the night, a warm, solid presence against her frail legs. He sat on the arm of her chair while she read or watched the garden, occasionally reaching out a paw to gently touch her hand. He followed Nurse Sarah with mild suspicion during her visits, but tolerated her ministrations towards Evelyn with quiet patience, as if understanding she was there to help. Evelyn blossomed under the cat's unassuming devotion. While the palliative treatments couldn't halt the inevitable progression of her illness, they did manage her symptoms more effectively, granting her precious weeks, then months, of relative comfort and clarity. And Marmalade's presence seemed to amplify their effect, providing a powerful, non-pharmacological dose of comfort and joy. She shared the story with Nurse Sarah, tears glistening in her eyes as she recounted giving Marmalade away, her long-held assumption he was gone forever, and the miracle of his return, pointing out the tiny nick in his ear as proof. Sarah listened, her own eyes moist. "Animals have ways we don't always understand, Evelyn," she said softly. "He knew where he belonged. He came back when you needed him most." Evelyn spent hours talking to Marmalade, not just reminiscing now, but sharing her present thoughts, her gratitude, her love for him. She worried about what would happen to him after she was gone. He was an old cat now. Finding another home wouldn't be easy. She spoke to Nurse Sarah and then to her niece, making careful arrangements. Sarah, who had grown fond of the gentle cat, quietly offered to ensure he found a loving home, perhaps even with one of the hospice volunteers who understood older animals, should Evelyn's niece be unable to take him. Knowing Marmalade would be cared for brought Evelyn immense peace of mind. Her focus shifted entirely from waiting for the end to savoring the present. Each day became a gift, measured not in prognosis or symptoms, but in moments of connection. The warmth of Marmalade's fur beneath her hand, the sound of his purr, the shared quiet as they watched the sunset paint the garden gold, the small gifts he still occasionally brought in, a particularly vibrant autumn leaf, a fallen camellia blossom. She understood them now not just as random occurrences, but as Marmalade's unique way of sharing the living world with her, of reminding her of the beauty that still existed beyond the confines of her room. The end, when it came, was peaceful. Evelyn passed away quietly in her sleep one cool autumn morning. Marmalade curled faithfully on the bed beside her, a steadfast companion, until the very last breath. Nurse Sarah found them that way, her heart aching, but also filled with a sense of profound rightness. Marmalade did find another loving home with a quiet hospice volunteer who understood his history and cherished his gentle nature. But those who knew Evelyn's story, the nurses, her niece, her friends, never forgot the tale of the orange cat who seemed to bring flowers or leaves or pebbles to a dying woman's bedside. They spoke of the miracle of his return, the unwavering loyalty that defied time and separation, and the profound way his quiet presence had rekindled a spark of life and brought immeasurable comfort in Evelyn's final sunlight hours. It was a testament, they all agreed, to the mysterious, powerful, and utterly unbreakable threads of love that connect hearts, both human and animal, across all barriers, even the veil of illness and the passage of time.